Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
And welcome in, everybody, to Sports Daily. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor with you. It is Tuesday after a holiday for some. Glad to be here with you. Jad Chambers producing. Welcome back. We're back in the groove. The travel days behind us, the weekend of golf behind us, as Tommy and Paul talked about yesterday. And now we look ahead to the NBA draft, the Major League Baseball season, NFL camps, all kinds of stuff now on that summer horizon. Tommy, how are you?
I'm good. The band is back together. Glad to see you back here. Hope you had a good time away, and we're ready to get into it today.
Yeah, I'm a little road weary. So we've taken 2 trips now in the last 2 weeks, and it's a lot to do that. But we didn't have choice. Timing was out of the control this year, but we got it done. We're back from Texas. Got to see the family. Going to Texas to see my family is always like a long party. It's like however many days you're there, my kids are always like, all right, what party are we going to today, Dad? And so we just bounce around, and here we go. We went to an Amarillo Sod Poodles game, who are in Wichita's league, the Windsurge League. We went to that on Father's Day. How was Father's Day now? His first Father's Day data too.
Yeah, it was good. I had the opportunity to play Prairie Dunes Country Club up in Hutch. Paul and I talked about it yesterday. So that was how I chose to spend, at least a portion of Father's Day. And my wife was okay with that. She was a rock star, watching both boys. And yeah, it was a good day. It was fun to get out and play a little golf.
That's always a good day. I've played just like you and I, the time you and I play. It's the only golf I've played yet this year.
Yeah.
It's a lot. You got a lot going on here. We drive back yesterday, and it's straight into like store business for the HTOs and trying to get caught up. It's always like traveling is nuts now with kids. Like everybody always has the joke, but it's kind of true. Like sometimes you need a vacation from vacation. Like we just need to like sleep in our own bed, and we're scrambling around. And our son, who does a couple days a week in summer school, is just pissed this morning that he's got to go back to school, and we're fighting that and trying to grab groceries. Traveling it takes a lot. It's great though. I mean, you get to see family and do all that stuff. And we come back now from golf, Tommy, and in the midst of all of it, we had weddings and all this. I didn't watch any of the U.S. Open. We talked about it Friday, and his scores didn't get as high as we thought. And, the Wichita, how was the Wichita Open? Was it as awesome as usual? I mean, I saw images and stuff. It looked like it was great, well attended and all that good stuff.
Yeah, it was great as always. And Paul and I discussed it yesterday. Dusty Buell, the new tournament director, did a phenomenal job in organizing everything, and his entire staff and all the volunteers and the ambassadors and everybody that goes into, making the Wichita Open one of the most premier events on the Korn Ferry Tour. It was fun. I was out there Friday afternoon, had a really good time out on the 18th green. I had a chance to go and check out 17 a little bit. I mean, it looks a little different than it used to, but it's awesome. And so definitely a fun experience.
It is. It's one of my favorite. I hate it. This is the first time since we've lived here that I believe that we missed it and didn't get out for at least some small part of it. And we were sad. We were sad to go. I love that tournament. I love that it's here. It's just right. I'm sometimes surprised that a bigger tour event doesn't rotate in just because of the turnout and everything that goes on with it. But it's just right. It's perfect. It's one of the events of the summer. I'm glad it went off well again. The NBA is done, Tommy, and you guys had the Chris Paul news yesterday. There's other news. We still don't have, I haven't seen anything on Fred VanVleet, which is a little bit interesting. We got the draft coming up in a couple of days. Most people have Grady Dick right around the top 10. It is sort of that season. This offseason probably will be wacky, and I think we can start there today. it's going to be wacky because, and I was talking to, I have a bunch of my nephews when I go home are all big sports fans. We're just sort of chatting up the NBA, and that Chris Paul trade came down, and it's just like, and I kept saying this, like, this offseason is going to be weird, and it's going to be weird because you sit here and you look at it as, can somebody catch Denver, and is Denver at that spot where we need to talk about them that way? And man, I think that they are. I think that they are that way. That they've been really good for a long time. This is the first time they went healthy. They were pretty dominant when we look back at the postseason. I do think it's that. And I do think we look at this offseason as, can anyone catch a healthy Denver? I think that's fair. And I think Denver's at that level.
Take a look at the teams in the West that are trying to make moves to compete with Denver. And I think that gives you the answer that you're looking for. And Phoenix is the perfect example of that, going out and getting a 3-time All-Star in Bradley Beal, bringing him in to try to team him up with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton if he stays with the Suns. It's an arms race. I used the analogy yesterday on the show that it's kind of like what the other teams in the AFC West do in football to try to catch the Chiefs, right? It's an arms race. They stockpile really talented players, things like that, trying to catch Kansas City. That's what other teams in the Western Conference and the NBA are trying to do to catch Denver. And I think it's very clear. It's very simple. They saw how basically dominant Denver was, not just in the playoffs, but throughout the entire season, only losing 7 times at home, and then their dominant playoff run. And they thought that these other teams are thinking, we've got to do other things. We've got to go out and find other superstars to come and join our franchises if we want to beat the Denver Nuggets. And that's kind of what I think we're going to see this offseason.
The Suns go all in. Also in that Beal trade, we have Landry Shamet, and he was interesting too. He left the Suns. That I don't know if you caught it, but I'd sense tension there for Shamet and the Phoenix fan base. So I'm sort of happy for him. Not that, you go to a team that's not going to contend. You lose that, but man, maybe he can just go back and be himself and not worry about it. There were a couple of times this year where it was just like, it doesn't seem like this is like jiving. And Shamet's such a nice dude, easygoing. So I'm sort of happy for him too. I don't know that this is all, is this going to put the Suns over the edge? I think it's probably possible. I think it's fair to think about it that way, because did the Kevin Durant thing even have time to really materialize in Phoenix? I don't know. I mean, I think there's enough talent there that we probably need to think about them that way in the offseason. Do they have a coach yet? Does Phoenix have a coach?
Yeah, did they hire Nick Nurse?
They hired Frank Vogel.
Frank Vogel. I got those two mixed up. Yeah, they hired Frank Vogel.
Yeah, I missed that one.
They do.
Okay. That happened a long time ago. That happened on June 3rd. Okay.
The 76ers hired Nick Nurse. That's where Nick Nurse went.
Yeah, 76ers will be real contender. Frank Vogel, really? That's interesting.
Yeah. Going back to Phoenix, though, I do think that it's going to be a massive disappointment for that organization and that fan base if they don't contend by going in and bringing in Bradley Beal. Like, this is a go all in and win right now move for the Phoenix Suns. They've got 4 players currently under max contracts. And so that window is now. The window is not in 2 years or 3 years. It's, Durant, Booker, and now Bradley Beal. Their goal, they've got to win right now. They've got to try to dethrone the Nuggets right now.
There's no question about it. No question about that. And that's the right move too. I mean, and look, people may dog on them for that, like if this doesn't work. But I think sometimes with the NBA, you have to, like, when you reach that point, and, there's lots of teams in this boat, like the Clippers, the 76ers, the Jazz hit that point. Milwaukee's been at that point, but Milwaukee got their title. There are a lot. Boston, I think, quite frankly, is at that point now. Like, you have to, like, if you're not quite there, you've got to put your foot down on the pedal and try to get there, I think. And, Denver's an interesting sort of, opposite of that, because they sort of stuck with it, but they had very good reasons it wasn't happening, right? They kept having injuries. They weren't fully healthy, but like, we've seen fully healthy Phoenix. We know what that team at its best has been, and it hasn't been good enough. So why would you just try it again? Like, if the same thing wasn't good enough now, You think Chris Paul and Kevin Durant, a year older, are going to be better next year and no? So yeah,
Well,
go try
especially not Chris
something.
Paul, especially not Chris Paul. And so, I think he averaged like 13 points a game last season in 50 some games that he played for Phoenix, averaged like 9 assists. Like it wasn't a terrible stat line, but Chris Paul is not going to be the difference maker at this point in his career to get the Suns up over the edge. So I don't have a problem, and I'm not surprised at all that Phoenix wanted to move on from Chris Paul. And especially if they can get a player the caliber of Bradley Beal. And that's the other aspect on this, is that Bradley Beal battled some injuries last year. He's no spring chicken either. He's 30.
No.
He's been in the league for 11 years. And I don't think that we talk about Bradley Beal quite as much as other superstars in the league. And I think it's because of the franchise that he's been a part of for the last 11 years, and so I'm really interested to see how he is able to work in the system that I guess Frank Vogel is going to implement in Phoenix, and being able to play alongside Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. Bradley Beal, when he was in Washington, had to be the guy. There weren't a whole lot of other pieces around him to be successful. He won't have to be the guy in Phoenix. He can be alongside Durant and Booker and DeAndre Ayton. And so I'm really interested to see how that pairing is going to work out.
Well, it is interesting too, because you have 3 like alpha scorers now on the same team and absolutely no depth. They've got 4 players that are making more than $30 million next year between Ayton, Booker, Beal, and Durant. I don't know how they're going to fill out the rest of their roster. Look, I don't think this is going to work. Let me just say that. I'm curious about it. I don't fault them for trying it. I think it'll be a nice effort. Beal was, he's a 23-point a game scorer last year, but he's not a point guard. So I got to find a point guard. At least I don't think he hasn't been one. Maybe he can be. I don't think so though. But maybe. But that's an interesting mix of players, right? Between Beal and Booker and Durant. Somebody's going to have to run the point, don't you think? Like, because that
they're all going to want the ball.
Put guys?
They all want the ball.
So I think you can work through that. I think when you have 3 vets like that, because Booker's going to be the one. I think when you've got 2 vets like Durant and Beal, I think they can. I think they're going to be okay as far as like. I need X. Yeah, I think that mix will. But what I wonder is like, okay, I don't think any of these guys have been true point guards. Somebody's going to have to bring it up because we can play Kevin Durant at the 4.
Yeah,
I don't think so. I mean, even if you play, I suppose, yeah, I just don't think you're going to, one of them is going to have to run the point. So maybe they can. Obviously they know more about that. It's NBA. It's a little harder for me to follow. So I don't know. Does it make him a real contender? I think you have to consider him a contender. I think you have to at least give him the benefit of the doubt there. Another team that is very likely should be a contender, the Boston Celtics. They do not intend to trade Jaylen Brown, and all signs, according to the Boston Globe, would point to him signing the Supermax, which is a 5-year, almost $300 million deal. So, what does that make? Does that make $60 million a year? Am I right on that?
Yeah. Yep.
Pocket
change.
That's crazy. The NBA money gets so crazy. I don't know. I don't know what the right move in Boston is. That you talk about the hardest decision to make. That's probably the hardest decision of the offseason for Boston. But can they run that back and draft? And it probably so. They're kind of fringy. They're a little bit fringy. I don't know how much the head coaching situation had to do with anything last year. I really like Jaylen Brown, but Supermax, boy, I don't know. I don't know if you could do it. I don't know if you could trade him and get more back and give yourself a better chance. They may be in the toughest spot because Phoenix, it's crystal clear. They got to go all in desperation. Right. I don't think Boston's at that point, right? Because their stars are relatively young. I think this is probably okay. And then you hope you got to draft really well or just hit it out of the park in free agency somehow to do that. But that's a ton of money for him. And that I guess you don't really have a choice. You could trade him, but if you trade him, you're not going to be better next year. And so that's where they're in a really tough spot.
And I don't think that Boston necessarily, has to go and try to add a bunch of pieces. That really when you look at next season, they should be, I would think, considered the favorite to win the East. I think it's going to depend upon, honestly, what Milwaukee does and, how Adrian Griffin works with Giannis. And can Milwaukee challenge Boston? Obviously, Miami made the finals. I'm not sure that even at this point, anybody will say that Miami's going to be, from a talent perspective and a roster perspective on paper, better than Boston. So I don't think that Boston really has to, they're not anywhere close to in the same position that Phoenix is in the West, where they have to feel like they have to go out and try to, get a player to get them over the hump. I think Boston has the talent. It's just going to be a matter of whether or not they can all gel together and get over that hump to be able to win a title.
Yeah, I think so too. Let's take a break. The IHOP hotline is open, 869-1240. Where does Fred VanVleet fit the best? Like, where would you like to see Fred land? Shocker fans. We'll talk about that. We'll touch on a lot of topics today. San Diego State, what in the world is happening there? That's a really interesting conversation we want to have as well. We'll make our way through this Tuesday. Glad to be back. It's Albracht and Castor Sports Daily coming right back. Odyssey and KEYN bring you Concerts in the Park, sponsored by IHOP. Free live music Friday from 8 to 10 in Andover Central Park at the Capitol Federal Amphitheater. That's at 1607 East Central Avenue in Andover. This Friday, it's across the pond. Bring your lawn chairs, blankets, and some extra cash for the food trucks. No coolers allowed. Gates open there at 6:30. Welcome back in. That IHOP hotline is open, 869-1240. Jake Albracht, Tommy Castor, back with you. Back on track, back in the groove, ready to get back to reality here after some travel. And we follow the NBA offseason. So sort of a recap of the latest there. And now to Fred VanVleet, the former Shocker. Really interesting. He turns down the ability to make, I think, 23 or 24 million. It sounds like just about every report I've seen looking like around 30 million annually is what he'll make. What happens with him will be really interesting. So there's been a lot of rumors. It is Hoops Hype has him rumored as a return to Toronto. The Rockets, the Lakers, the Suns would be off the table now, and the Magic. All very interesting fits, I think. Boy, if I had to go with my gut, Tommy, I would say that he ends up back in Toronto just because it's, he's been so important to them there. But I think there's some really interesting teams on that list, most notably the Lakers. And, I think stylistically, when I think about all of this, the Rockets are sort of rebuilding, the Magic are sort of rebuilding, right? The Suns are off the table. Raptors, I think, again, are most likely, but a team like the Lakers, who are close, I think closer, there's a lot of risk with the Lakers because of the age of Anthony Davis and LeBron James, but, Reeves stepped up. Would adding a piece like Fred VanVleet be enough for a team like that? Boy, I think it might be. Fred's pacing, his defense, his clutch, all of those things to me, and he's such an elite level passer. Well, that seems like that could be a really good fit there to me.
I think that it would be a lot of fun to watch, and I think VanVleet would thrive in LA. I think the only issue would be, is there anybody on that Lakers roster that they would be willing to give up that Toronto would want to get back? Like, that's going to be the
Russell
big issue.
Is the guy that I've seen
That's
that would
the
have
guy,
to
but
come back.
Does
And
Toronto
Toronto
want
has to
D'Angelo
want
Russell?
him. Right. Yeah.
Right.
Toronto
That's
has
the big
to want
thing.
him.
So I don't know if that is realistic or not. You could be looking potentially at a sign and trade to get VanVleet to LA. I just don't know what the Raptors are really looking for. And that's kind of been the X factor in all of this, right? Is that we really don't know what's happening with Toronto. They've been pretty tight-lipped, I think, about what their plans are. Do they want? I mean, clearly they would want Fred VanVleet back, a player of that caliber, but they haven't really, as far as I can tell, been vocal about their desire to try to sign him to a deal and bring him back. Nor have they really talked much about other options outside of Fred VanVleet if he ends up leaving Toronto. So I don't know. I don't know what Toronto's intentions are during this offseason and how hard they would want to try to work at re-signing Fred VanVleet. But if they don't, and they're, wanting to try to trade him to get some value back, I think the Lakers would be a fun fit. I just don't know if there's anybody outside of D'Angelo Russell on that roster that they would want.
I think it'd be the most fun fit. And Toronto's got a lot of these guys are going to be free agents. I think decisions have to come from Siakam and Anunoby. So, they're sort of in that mode too. Like, what do we do here? Do we rebuild? Do we run it back? Like, I don't know. They've got a tough spot. You kind of have to go all in one way or the other, I would think, which is why Fred's may move a little bit slowly. Boy, the Lakers would be a fun fit. And I think that's probably the most fun destination for Fred. He'd get, matched up with good young players in either Houston or Orlando, which would probably be a good fit for him. He's got a title. He's an all-star. He's got all those things going for him. I don't know. It'll be hard. And look, the money's going to matter here in Toronto. I would imagine Toronto, if anybody goes super big on it, it would be Toronto.
Yeah.
But I don't know. His will be, sort of that first big domino of free agency. We got the first big domino in the Beal trade. And as always, I mean, as always, it's going to get wild in the NBA offseason. It's just what part of that does Fred have? I don't know. And it'll be fun to watch. It's so cool to see it. The other thing, and they didn't play together at Wichita State, but Austin Reeves obviously there in LA, that would make that fun. The Lakers are a team. So we talked about some of the contenders. Are the Lakers a team that could become a contender next year? I think that they still are. I think they looked close, and probably, if we're being honest, the closest to Denver, right? Even Miami. I mean, the Lakers, that wasn't a long series, but it was tight. I think if they, and it's just like, would I bet on it? No, because you got to bet on health, and that always seems like a silly thing to do. But whether it's bringing in a guy like Fred VanVleet, or maybe just having a good draft, right? Just get a couple of role players, whatever it is. Like, and I don't know that anymore, like, that's a destination stop. Like, do you think anybody in free agency is like, oh, I'll just go play for less money to go try to win a title in LA? Like, I don't think that's happening. So I don't know. They'll have to get a little lucky and do a really good job, but I think we could still consider them contenders. I think they're still in the mix for sure, because I think they may have been the closest anyway.
Yeah, I think that they are, but I think that if the playoffs tell us anything, it's that they've got to have another piece. They've got to have another piece to try to get over that hump. And it goes back to what we talked about in the first segment about how clearly the Nuggets, as the NBA champions, are the class of that conference. They're the class of the NBA in general, but especially that Western Conference. And so we saw it with the Suns and the Bradley Beal trade. We're probably going to see it with the Lakers. We're going to see it with other teams in that conference. What can they do? What pieces can the Lakers add to try to bring down Denver? That's ultimately the $1 million question.
There's a lot of moving parts. It'll be a wild off season. I just, again, like, back to our original point in the last, I just don't know if I think anybody's going to do anything for me that knocks Denver off that perch. I think Denver is that good. I think, watch Philadelphia, watch the Lakers, watch Milwaukee. Phoenix made its move, and that's probably what we're going to be looking at as the favorites going into next year. And look, the NBA showed us the last few years. It's not like foregone conclusions are not anywhere near the NBA right now. You've got to be able to get there. But Fred VanVleet's will be the most interesting. I always say watch Chicago with him too, by the way, because he's from Rockford, Illinois, and loves his time there. But I have not heard that rumor anywhere. It's just sort of like one I keep thinking to myself to keep an eye on. Speaking of Fred, have you seen, and I don't know that we've talked about this, maybe you and Paul have, as we sort of talk about pro basketball. Have you seen the roster coming back for this reunion at the TBT, which is coming up probably faster than we even realize for this celebration of the Final Four? You've got Fred, you've got Ron, you've got Evan Wessel's going to be there. Takeo Cotton's going to be there. Clay Anthony Early is confirmed. It's going to be awesome. We don't know about Greg Marshall. We don't know how that will play out. That's all just sort of out there and up in the air, because this won't have anything to do, technically speaking, with the school. But this looks like it's going to be pretty cool and a pretty fun little thing for Shockers fans going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe that 10 years ago was when they went to the Final Four. I mean, we're over 10 years, now from that happening, and just the fact that, looking back on it and knowing that, these guys are coming back, and the career that Fred VanVleet has had in the NBA. Ron Baker spent time in the NBA. Clay Anthony Early spent time in the NBA, and getting all these guys back together for a celebration of that. I guess, there's really no other word than just magical Final Four run that they had back in 2013. I'm looking forward to that. I think it's going to be really cool for Wichita to be able to see these guys all come back together.
So and just roster notes, by the way, because you and I haven't talked TBT all the time. KU fans, I think, have got to be excited now about this group coming in. Dedrick Lawson, Devon Dotson is on board. Jamari Traylor's one of my favorite Jayhawks. He's on board. Marcus Garrett's on board. Keith Langford, Marcus Morris is the coach. Markieff Morris is another coach. Thomas Robinson's on this roster. Wayne Selden's on this roster. Tyshawn Taylor's on. I mean, Tommy, like, of all the, KU teams that we've seen, we haven't seen a ton of them. I mean, this is this is like top notch, right? Like this is, if you're a KU fan, which you're a KU fan, like this is about as good as it's getting for this deal.
What I love about TBT also is that the longer it goes on year in and year out, you get bigger named players every single year, it seems like. And, I think some of that comes down to just the credibility of this tournament growing year after year. And the fact that, by the way, there's a major cash prize, for the winner of the tournament. And so we've seen teams that, we know, and that, players that we know in this area have made runs in TBT before. The fact that there's a regional that's being hosted in Wichita, that definitely adds to it as well. But that's a fun roster for KU fans for sure. And there's a lot of KU fans in this city. And so I think that, knowing that, I mean, that there's just, I would imagine as we get closer to TBT, that excitement will continue to grow.
July 19th through 25th. So I just kind of rattled off some of the teams there. We only know in Wichita, I'm pretty sure that we've got Wichita State in the Mass Street. So I rattled off that roster. Now we know that here's the thing about the Aftershocks is they've gotten really good at this tournament, right? So if I tell you that KU roster, which we did, and then now we move to the Aftershocks roster, and Connor Frankamp will be the anchor there, but they announced that Altery Gilbert's going to play, Asborn Midgard's going to play, which will be, I think, really interesting. Daryl Willis is back. You've got Samaje Haynes-Jones and Marcus McDuffie back, who've been a big part of, those winning teams. Trey Wade, that will be interesting. He's young and fresh and all of these things. Then they've got sprinkled in a couple other players that you probably recognize or whatever. But like roster to roster with the Aftershock success that you've seen the last couple of years, like if we're, and I don't know if we'll have betting lines on this over at BetMGM when the time comes. I bet we might. And that'll be interesting because you've got the, got the Elam ending, but which roster would you be more comfortable with?
Oh, between the Aftershocks and the Mass Street team?
Yes.
Oh man. Shoot. Probably the Mass Street team. I think both rosters are going to be really good. And the Aftershocks, like you mentioned, have a history of doing really well in this tournament. Man, that's a tough one. I don't know. I think from just a fan perspective, man, I'm excited to see, the old dogs like Keith Langford and Tyshawn Taylor, Thomas Robinson on the roster for Mass Street. And then you've got the Morris twins coaching it. Like from a nostalgia point of view, that's really fun for me.
What's
but
new?
Man,
it's new also.
Sure.
Like that matters.
Sure. But as you mentioned, that experience that the Aftershocks have in this tournament, that might push them over the edge too. That might be a toss-up for me. Yeah.
I think it does. I think it pushes them over the edge because you've got Connor and Marcus, and those two have anchored it for a while. They just experience matters in this tournament. We know that now. That Mass Street roster is way better than I thought it would be, though. And I'm sure that has to do with the Morris twins being a part of it. And, when those guys make that call, it's probably a little bit easier. But, man, I can't wait. We're a little less than a month away from it. I don't know. Like, I hope K-State can still get a team together. Oklahoma State has always been fun when they can get a team together. It's fun. It's one of these things. Like, this is always strange. When I see the success of this TBT every year in Wichita, and it's going to be even bigger probably than ever with KU there again this year, and this KU roster is loaded, it makes me want the NCAA tournament back so badly. Like, I hate that we missed that year with COVID and we just keep having to wait for that NCAA tournament because it's going to be awesome again. That was, as we've been here, like a couple of the things that have caught me off guard is like some of the great sports moments physically in Wichita have been these TBT tournaments. And that year at the NCAA tournament might top everything. And I think it's coming again. I think it's coming again and will be just as awesome again. But when I see this, it's not exhibition. When I see this pro tournament come in every summer, it's like, man, that NCAA tournament's got to get back here. It's going to be so awesome.
Yeah. Wasn't it, refresh my memory, it was Michigan that had the buzzer beater when the tournament was here in Wichita. Was that right?
Yeah. But you had some really great fan bases. You had Houston here. Mm-hmm. You had San Diego State here, Michigan, and Kansas. And I think there's one other, and I don't remember who it was. But and then you had the smaller schools. But man, I just like, it's such a festival and it's so amazing. And the timing was unfortunate, but we will get it back. And it's always, it always does sort of depend on like, well, okay, you get, the Wichita bid that year. Like, are they going to be good enough to get that bid that year? Which of course they were the last time. And that makes a big difference, but it is basketball crazy. And I'm so excited about basketball too, as we have summer camps sort of starting for the Shockers and work being done. And we're trying to get Paul Mills in here sometime in the next few weeks as they work through their summer schedule to get an update on how that's going. We'll have Kevin Saul in this week. Maybe he's been able to catch a couple practices. We can get his insight on this new roster. But it's it is basketball season. And look, we get slow in the summer, obviously. The TBT sort of changes that up a little bit. I don't know that we've had a better collection of talent in a TBT that we care about, obviously, than this, what we've got shaping up this year. And, I hope that K-State, who's put together some pretty exciting, talented rosters people can get excited for, can do that too. Again, I think we've only heard that Kansas and Wichita State are in this regional so far, and we're a month away now. So that news will probably start dropping pretty soon.
It's tomorrow. I just looked it up. The selection show is tomorrow.
Wait, what is the
YouTube.
selection show? Is that a new thing they're doing?
So they'll be revealing the full TBT bracket tomorrow at 11 a.m. So right after we're done, it's a live YouTube show hosted by Seth Greenberg and Andrew Zoldan, and they're revealing the entire TBT bracket.
So, okay. So that probably leads me to believe K-State's not going to play. And maybe all those teams have been announced. We just don't know where they're going. But we'll find out tomorrow, I guess. Then it doesn't matter. It's all going to be about Wichita State and KU unless K-State gets in. But if K-State was getting in, we'd know they were coming to Wichita. I'm fairly certain. So probably not. Hey, we're back. It's been a while. Let's give something away. Jad, let's do some HTO coffee cards. So since I've been on all these vacations, we've rolled out 8 new iced coffee flavors over at HTO Wichita East. We only have Coffee East, not at both locations. So go in there. Let's give away a couple of coffee cards, Jad, and we'll let people try that new iced coffee. Let me know what you think. HTO, it's at 127th and 21st. Feeling festive today. We'll have another giveaway coming up in the next hour. A little baseball giveaway. 869-1240 is the number to call. We'll come back. We've got San Diego State news, rumors to get to. I think that's a fascinating topic as you've got a back and forth between them and the Mountain West. Still no deal for the Pac-12, and I don't know what's going to happen now, but a lot more to come here on a Tuesday edition of Sports Daily Albracht and Castor. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Sports Daily. Albracht and Castor. Tommy, somebody was telling me over the weekend, you just heard a Father's Day joke there on Bob and Tom, that Father's Day, according to a poll, was like the 20th ranked or most cared about, or least cared about, I suppose you could say, holiday of the rankings. Is that surprising you? I don't think it is.
Nope.
It's just sort of there, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think Father's Day, most dads are just like, I don't know, like maybe leave me alone this Father's Day. Like, don't nag me. I mean, honestly, like, what do you want? Like, what do you want for Father's Day? I felt obligated to get my dad a hat and I don't know why. I know he doesn't care about it. So I get him this card and I'm like, I don't know what to get my dad. He doesn't know really how to use a gift card. He's not going to use it if I get it for him. So I'm going to get him a hat for this game. And I hand it to him. He's like, what is this? I'm like, what's a hat? And he just like stuck it under the seat and forgot it. We picked it up as we were leaving. It's just like, I should have known better than that. Why did I even waste my time there?
You know, my wife, and I love her to death, but, you know, and I don't know if your wife is this way, but when it was Mother's Day, it was like Mother's Day weekend. Like, it wasn't a day, it was a
gotta
weekend.
do a brunch and you gotta do
all these different things.
Yeah.
And then, you know, like there was a gift involved. Like, I think I got her a necklace and, you know, all of this stuff. And then, Father's Day, and I'm not complaining. I got to play golf. I was happy about that. But, it was like, hey, here's a card for you. Happy Father's Day. I'm like, okay, fair enough. And like, it's fine. And I'm not complaining about it. I don't need anything. It's just the difference between the two holidays. It is what it is. I think most dads, I think you're exactly right. They just kind of want to be left alone. Like, let them take a nap on the couch. That's as good of a Father's Day gift as you can give.
I don't know. I think you
go ahead,
guys.
Jeff.
I think you guys need to look into German Father's Day. If you've ever heard of it, it's called Männertag. And I can't remember exactly what time of year it is, but it sounds so much better and more festive than American Father's Day. Basically, it's just coolers, booze, and a trip out into the woods.
That does sound pretty awesome.
I'm in. Count me in.
It's, so I'm thinking back to like the collective Father's Day, and it is like you get lawn tools, or it's like, oh, you want to grill out for the family for Father's Day, and it's like,
right.
Well, all right,
not really. Yeah.
Okay. So like this past Father's Day, I'm trying to think of what it was. Sunday, right?
Yeah, it's always
Sunday. So Saturday night was the wedding we traveled home for. So, just super hungover on Sunday, because weddings are always super fun. And, it's not just booze, but like you dancing all night. So you're just zapped, right? And one of my brothers, who's a dad of 4, makes this big extravagant breakfast out in the country. So that's his, Father's Day. That's what he's doing. And we're traveling. So we really didn't do anything anyway. But I'm sitting there, and there was one point, because we got 3 kids and everybody's tired, and we're trying to like bounce around, and I started to get just a little bit of grief. And I was like, for Father's Day, why don't you just leave me alone? I'm going to take a nap. And it didn't work. It was just like, I just need a minute here. I just need a minute. But yeah, it was like one dad was cooking out, and one dad, like, it's funny. And that's all right. 'Cause it's every holiday, by the way. Do guys care about Valentine's Day?
No.
When was the last time you had like a big birthday thing? Like my wife gets a birthday month, I think.
Yeah.
And like, what's anniversary? Like, what do you want to do for our anniversary? Whatever you want to do, sweetie. Like, I don't know. Like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What is the guy's holiday that we do care about? Like, what is the one that we care about?
Super Bowl Sunday, maybe.
Yeah.
Does that count?
I mean, it's gonna, or March Madness, the opening 2 days of March Madness. Like it probably does just hinge around like the sporting event. Which
a
is
lot of dads
Labor Day?
really get into Halloween. A lot of dads will jump into, like that sort of thing. I'm not really
We're
a
not
Halloween
huge
guy, so I don't really care
people.
about that.
I'm not sure my favorite holiday isn't Labor Day. Because, and that's, excluding like Christmas and Thanksgiving and all that stuff, but just like of the other like one-off holidays, because it coincides with fantasy football draft weekend. And that may be the weekend where I honestly like ask for the most freedom. Like, hey, I need to just like check out for 3 days and do fantasy football drafts all day.
Right. I think the best thing about Father's Day for me this year, I mentioned being able to play some golf, and what made it different from any other time I play golf. And I think this is where my wife was like, this is my gift to you for Father's Day, was I'm not going to ask you when you're going to be done. Typically that's like, a text of like, when do you think you're going to be home?
Now, I
think that was the gift. Like, I'm just going to leave you alone and let you play, and I'm not going to ask you when you're going to be home.
I would guess that there's 0 chance you went and played golf with no check-in whatsoever.
No, there was a check-in. Don't get me wrong, but there was never a pressure of like, how much longer? How much longer do you have? What's your ETA? When do you think? Like, it was just kind of a, hey, how's it going? Right?
How many
holes do you
beers
have
did
left?
you drink?
How many beers have you?
How
had?
tired are you?
Right.
Yeah.
Are you going to be able to put the kids to bed when you get home? Like, those things weren't present on Father's Day. That was the gift that I
That's
was given,
all you can ask for.
Not having that pressure on my shoulders.
That is all you can ask for, by the way. Like, you can't ask for much more than that. Just sort of, and I think that's it. And what sad creatures we are. It's like, I don't know, just leave us alone maybe today. Like that'd be a great Father's Day gift.
Hope everybody did
Happy
Father's Day.
Hope everybody did have a great Father's Day over the weekend. It's always great. We're joking here. Nobody's complaining. We're all very lucky to be dads. 869-1240 is the number to call. We'll come back. Let's start hour number 2 of this San Diego State stuff, because it obviously pertains to the Big 12 to some degree. To what degree? I think that's the point up for debate. Albracht and Castor. We'll be back after this.
Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It's Sports Daily. It's hour number 2. It's Albracht and Castor. We're glad to be here with you on this Tuesday. The IHOP hotline is open. 869-1240 is the number. We talked a lot about the NBA and what's been sort of cracking here as we begin the offseason. We got the draft coming up later this week. All eyes on Grady Dick. Congratulations to Tyler, by the way, for winning our HTO giveaway. Get his hands on some of our coffee over there at 27th and 121st. Remember, coffee only available at the East location. 8 new iced coffee flavors for you to try out. Summer flavor, by the way, launches tomorrow. So I think everybody will be excited about that. That'll be at both locations. Tommy, this San Diego State stuff is where we'll start hour number 2. It's pretty crazy. So San Diego State sends the Mountain West a letter and just says, we might be leaving. We'd like to inform you. And they come back and say, well, we're not really telling you that we're leaving, but here's what we'd like for you to do, Mountain West. Like, if just in case we leave, which we want to, if the opportunity is available to us, we know a deadline's coming up. If we decide to do that, maybe could you help us out a little bit on how we're going to get out of the deal? And of course, the Mountain West comes back and they're like, yeah, no. The Mountain West basically saying we're sort of taking this as you're leaving. And I don't know how this is going to happen because, I'm looking now at the San Diego Union Tribune, which would be the local reporting on this for the first time. So if they provide notification by June 30th, they would spend next year in the Mountain West and then leave for a $17 million exit fee. If they wait until after June 30th, that exit fee doubles, or they would have to wait another year then to get to 17. Their athletic director told the paper they can't pay that extra amount. So June 30th is sort of the date here. And I think that has run in line with an unofficial deadline as well for the Pac-12. I think the way that I interpret everything I'm seeing is that San Diego State would like to join the Pac-12. They've got until June 30th to do that. The Pac-12 has got this June 30th weird deadline, to decide if or to try and determine this TV deal. And this is starting to make some sense with some of the, the reporting, like we heard from Fitz, that June 30th is like this unofficial deadline because a team like San Diego State, they don't have a choice. I think honestly, like for San Diego State, if June 30th or you're within that realm and the Pac-12 doesn't have anything done and the Big 12 is willing to, look at you, I think they go to the Big 12. Now, we have to know that the Big 12 wants them, and that's the piece
Right.
we don't technically know yet. And that's always been just sort of a minor flirting. So then it becomes a question of, well, does the Big 12 want them? But now that here's the elephant in the room. San Diego State apparently sends this letter to say to the Mountain West, like, we think we're going to be gone. The Mountain West is taking that as an exit. So if June 30th rolls around, will San Diego State even be able to say we're returning? Or is the Mountain West going to hold them to the fire, which if I was the Mountain West, I'd do the same thing. This is really interesting. And I think the Big 12 is getting some leverage here.
How in the world did San Diego State back themselves into this corner? I mean, like there's counsel that this school has that should have, you would think, have told them, hey, by the way, this letter you're going to send could be interpreted legally by the Mountain West as an official notice that you were exiting the conference. And how it wasn't in their minds going to be interpreted that way is beyond me. I mean, I feel like that, that whole situation was bungled. Like they probably should have found a better way to have a conversation with the Mountain West.
Well,
discussions or whatever.
The better way, unfortunately, I think, Tommy, is they shouldn't have said anything. And that sucks too, because, you're trying to like give a little heads up and say, hey, we think we're going to do this. Like, can we start to look at these details and make this easier on everybody?
But if there's room to interpret it as a official legal notice that they're exiting the conference, and even if that wasn't their intention, if that's the way the Mountain West is interpreting it on paper legally, you would think that the university has counsel that would have advised them of that. Like, hey, before you send this, just know the Mountain West is going to probably interpret this as a legally binding notice that we're exiting the conference. And then at that point, San Diego State has a decision to make. Like, do we send this letter or do we not? Do we sit on it? Because June 30th could easily come and go, and San Diego State could have no conference at that point. I think the fact that San Diego State asked the Mountain West to push back that deadline, to me, says the Pac-12 isn't in a position to formally invite them yet to their conference. And if the Mountain West isn't willing to extend the deadline, then San Diego State, I guess, is going to be floating out there without a conference for a while. I mean, they'll find one. I mean, whether it's the Pac-12 or otherwise, like they'll make it work. The Athletic also is reporting, by the way, that the Big 12 and San Diego State do not view each other as priorities right now. I think the key word is right now, but as of this moment, the reporting is that the Big 12 and San Diego State are not in conversations about San Diego State joining the conference, which that is different than what Tim Fitzgerald has talked about over the last couple of weeks.
Because the Big 12, I mean, they're like I said, they have leverage here. The Big 12 can use this as bait to Arizona probably and Colorado more importantly. If the Pac-12 gets there, because then you can package that up. I don't know that the Big 12 would only want San Diego State, but I think they would probably want San Diego State if it also included 2 other Western schools in Colorado and Arizona. So I think that's where the Big 12 is under no pressure here, by the way. The Big 12 is in a great position. I selfishly want this to happen because my wife's alma mater would then play Kansas and Kansas State. That would be super fun. I also think San Diego State's a great ad. I've said it a million times. I think San Diego State is as attractive right now as Houston or Cincinnati or some of these schools, because you got a major metropolitan area right now that is starved for sports because you took the Chargers away. And we've seen that with the Padres and now San Diego State basketball. I mean, I was just out there and I talked to a lot of people, most of whom were not San Diego State grads, who are really excited about the Aztecs. You got a real opportunity there if you're the Big 12. I want to see it happen. Makes me wonder if San Diego State gets backed into a corner, could the AAC be like, hey, you know what? Like, let's come over here and join us, because they don't really have a West Coast footprint. I don't know what's going to happen. My guess is that by June 30th, San Diego State will be playing in either the Pac-12 or the Big 12. The elephant in the room here is what is happening with the Pac-12? Like, why are some of these schools still waiting around on this? Like, what do you think's going to happen? If it hasn't happened yet, what do you think is going to all of a sudden change for the dynamic for the Pac-12? It is so crystal clear to me that what the Big 12 already got done is going to be better. And at least at the minimum, less of a headache. So what are you still holding out hope for the Pac-12 at this point? I don't think it's there. I don't think what they want is there.
Yeah, unless this whole thing has been kept under wraps brilliantly by the Pac-12, which I don't think it has.
No.
I don't think it has. But unless there's some kind of like last second Hail Mary magic trick that George Kliavkoff, the Pac-12 commissioner, can pull a crazy rabbit out of his hat, I don't see it either. Unless he is such a good salesman to the universities in the conference by telling them, hang with me until June 30th, we'll have something to reveal. I think it's a bill of goods. I think June 30th is going to come around and there's not going to be anything on the table, or if there is, it's not going to be anything of significance. And I think that, that informal, unofficial June 30th deadline, we're going to start seeing, in my opinion, dominoes start falling fairly quickly after that. And whether that means Colorado and then Arizona, and then who knows from there, I think it's going to happen because barring some kind of crazy shift, what is this deal for the Pac-12? It's going to be heavy on streaming, right? It's going to be probably, a combination of, broadcast and streaming, but heavy on the streaming side. We don't even know who the broadcast partners potentially could be. Remember, it was not that long ago, we were having discussions about the Ion network, for God's sakes. Like, nobody knows. But I think that the optimism, at least in my mind, that it's going to be something that's credible and feasible and, that can rival what the Big 12 has. I don't see that happening.
I don't either. This is all weird too with this particular situation, because you have to you got to think of it too, because San Diego State now has themselves in a mess because they were trying to negotiate this stuff and say, oh, hey, we think we're going to leave. We think that, we've brought so much to the table here on this. And, we brought all this money in. Could we maybe get a discount? And of course, the leagues are never going to do this because the Mountain West sees San Diego State is probably one of its most valuable, if not the most valuable asset it has. Like, no, it's not. Somebody on social media, I think, said, why would you pre-negotiate a prenup? You have to understand. And it brings me back to everyone gets so offended when overnight USC and UCLA are like, okay, we're gone. Or Texas and Oklahoma are like, all right, we're out.
Yeah.
You want to know why they do that? Because of this. There's really no other choice. This breakup is not going to go smooth. It won't, because the conference being left is always going to be in a worse position. Like, it can't happen that way, especially when you're breaking contract. It's not like it's an expiring contract or like you're literally going to break the agreement that you made to do this. That isn't good ever for the party that's being left. So it's never going to work smoothly. So don't ever be shocked when teams just up and leave, because that's really like legally and contract. That's about the only way you can do it. And that's what, that's what gets me on this is, why did San Diego State send that letter? Like, did you really think that
Right.
handful of millions of dollars is going to, the Mountain West is going to be like, yeah, you know what? You're right. You did bring more to the table. Let's give you some of that. Because Mountain West is like, no, you're about to leave us high and dry. Like, we're not going to have as valuable a league now. So here's San Diego State. And I honestly think, because if the difference is $17 million, they make like $6 million in their media rights deal or something like that. And I think at that point, you just got to go independent for a year, don't you? Like, you just might be homeless.
Okay, so that brings up another point, because San Diego State, I think they clearly bungled this, deal as far as the notice is concerned, and they overplayed their hand. But do we really think that the Mountain West is going to kick out a team that just reached the national title game in basketball and men's basketball, and is, probably their most valuable member? Like, even if they took that letter as gospel and official notice that San Diego State was looking to leave the conference, if San Diego State doesn't have a Pac-12 invitation by that deadline, is the Mountain West really going to kick out a team that's going to, you would think, conceivably make the conference money in the future? I mean, I think that's the $1 million question. Would the Mountain West do that? Maybe they would, but would you really want to have a team that reached the national title game be homeless for a while? I'm not sure that that's going to happen.
I don't know. I mean, if they're leaving anyway.
But why not try to squeeze as much juice out of them as possible before they hit the road?
I don't know.
I have a hard time thinking they'll be independent. I don't know. And maybe the Mountain West is going to,
I don't think they'll be independent
and dig their heels
either,
in and say, hey, you gave us that notice, get out of here. But I have a hard time thinking that's going to happen.
I don't know that that's going to happen, but at best or at worst, whichever way you want to look at it, the issue is they've given up their negotiating power now too with the Pac-12 and the Big 12, because now it's far more likely one of those leagues could be like, yeah, but you're going to get a smaller revenue shift or a revenue share.
Right.
I don't know that the Big 12 is interested in doing that, but I think the Pac-12 would be. And, if you're San Diego State now potentially homeless, you'd be far more likely to have to take something like that, I would think. Like, cautionary tale here. It's a cautionary tale. And it's one for myself too, because I'm always an open book, like in business or anything else, where I'm just like, well, let's, I don't want to. Sometimes you got to step on toes to move up. And and it's hard. Like, it's a brutal thing to do, because there's probably good relationships. And obviously the best thing for San Diego State will be to join the Pac-12 or the Big 12. Like, there's no question about that. And there's no question about if they have that offer, they're going to take it. It just doesn't seem necessary to try to, to baby that reality. That reality is a reality, and you're just going to have to go, because that's what this is going to be. You think Texas or Oklahoma, had they gone to Bob Bowlesby and been like, hey, we think we want to go join the SEC, how can we all make this amicable? No, like, that's not going to happen. The Big 12 is going to panic and be like, oh my God, what do we do now? And it's that way in every industry too, by the way. It's not just this. So we'll see. I think that the Big 12 in all of this would now currently be in the best position. The Pac-12 is in a better position potentially, because I think their chances of being able to add San Diego State on a smaller revenue share go up. And San Diego State's just going to have to wait and hope, I think, that the Pac-12 gets this mega deal that they're a part of. But I do think that if the Pac-12 drags its feet on this, I think this increases the chance of a team like San Diego State being in the Big 12. Now, the Big 12 has to want them. As a separate conversation, I think the Big 12 should want them. I think San Diego State fits a really nice profile, especially if you can get at least Colorado, if not Colorado and Arizona, to get west. I think San Diego State has got a ton of potential, as much as Houston does, right? Houston's a bigger city in some ways, but Houston's got a lot, you got a lot going on in Houston. San Diego, as a major city in this country, does not have, they have the Padres, and that's kind of it now. I don't talk to many Chargers fans who are real excited about that team being in LA. Like, it's not like that. There's a lot of San Diego folks who are just like, yeah, well, we'll just drive, up the road and go in LA. No, they're kind of mad about it. And San Diego State may be where people land. That happens all the time. And at that point, it would become as big a city, right, that celebrates a college as we have.
Right. I don't pretend to be a very intelligent person a lot of the time. And I'm not going to be clearly in the room doing the negotiating with San Diego State and the Pac-12. But even I can tell throughout this entire process, all these different things have been just bungled. The way that the Pac-12 has handled it, the way that San Diego State now has jumped in and they've made mistakes in this, this doesn't seem like it's that hard. This is not a difficult thing. I understand that you're dealing with contracts and media rights deals and revenue shares and all of those other things, but at the surface, at its core, this shouldn't be that difficult. It shouldn't have been. The Pac-12 created this of their own doing. Like the fact that the Pac-12 is in this position, they did it to themselves. The same way that the reason that San Diego State is now potentially without a conference, they did it to themselves. And again, it shows such a position of strength that the Big 12 is in right now, because they can sit back and they can wait. They've expanded and they've done the things that they've needed to do to stay viable and get a media rights deal that is viable and all of that. Now they can sit back. They can see what the Pac-12 is going to do. It's probably not going to be anything great. They can sit back and see what they want to do with San Diego State, and then maybe get San Diego State at a discount if all things, come down to that. It's kind of like Brett Yormark and the Big 12. They're playing chess while the other, the other conferences, the Pac-12 and San Diego State right now, they're playing checkers.
The problem for San Diego State, if I read this correctly, is that we're not sure if the Big 12 wants them. And I think the Big 12 would want them if they get the others, but not if they don't.
Right.
And I get that. That does make some sense to me. They're certainly more valuable as a package West deal than they are individually. So that's one piece of it. And their problem is everybody's waiting on this Pac-12 deal or no deal. So then it comes down to these other schools. If they're sort of caught in limbo here, I don't know what the Pac-12 could have done differently, honestly, because I'm just not sure there was ever going to be a lot there for them. When the Big 12 made the move to preemptively redo their deal and beat the Pac-12 to the deadline, that was the chess move. That's what, put the Pac-12 in a worse position. I don't know, in a perfect world, like if everything was equal, which league is more valuable between the Pac-12 and the Big 12. It's probably pretty comparable. But Big 12 made the first move, which we've always said, like, go now, go get big now, right? They expanded, and then they went to the table and said, let's get it done. We'll get a better deal than anybody expects us to. So now in this ever-changing climate, it's a timing thing for the Pac-12. 2-3 years ago, if this exact same scenario played itself out, the Pac-12 would probably be fine. But people they're anxious right now with the economy and these networks. We see it every day. They're slashing. So are the tech companies, by the way, which, these streaming rights and all that, Amazon and all these places that you try to shop around to there. I just don't know what the Pac-12 could have done other than beat the Big 12 to a new deal, which it overplayed its hand. That's its fatal mistake. It could be fatal. It could be real fatal. Like, this could go real sideways on the Pac-12 if that deal's not done in about 10 days, because I don't know how much longer you're going to have Colorado and Arizona, because if teams know the Big 12 covet them, if you get to a certain point, why are you going to wait anymore? I don't think you can
use
take
that to your
risk.
advantage. Use that to your
I just don't think
advantage.
you can take the risk. Like, you've given the Pac-12 now, 6 months?
And how much longer? And I think the Big 12 is in a position to be patient. because they don't have to have Colorado and Arizona. They would like Colorado and Arizona, but I don't think they have to have Colorado and Arizona. So the longer that you put it off, if you're those two schools, and wait for the Pac-12, there might come a time where the Big 12 is like, nah, we're good. Like we've waited too long. Good luck with the Pac-12. Good luck with the conference that has the media rights deal that is not very good, and you're not going to get that exposure. There's a reason why Colorado has scheduled, like, I think several different Board of Regents meetings over the last couple of weeks to discuss things like this. Like, there's going to be a move made very soon. I don't know if we're talking about in the next week or the next 10 days or what that looks like, but I think it's got to come sooner rather than later for the sake of all parties involved.
Well, I definitely do. I don't think the Big 12 is going to run out of patience for Arizona and Colorado. I think they'll just be waiting with open arms and say, come on, baby, we'll take you. And that's probably the case for most of the Pac-12 schools. I'm not sure about San Diego State, but I think those Pac-12 schools add plenty of value. And I'm sure that those conversations right now are happening. Because think about this, too. If you're ESPN and you've got this deal to the Big 12, it is still far cheaper to expand that deal and add more quality schools than it is to totally redo a deal with another conference, right? So, yeah, it may cost ESPN and Fox and whoever a little bit more money to add those schools to the Big 12 because they got to pay them. But that's still cheaper than doing a brand new deal with the Pac-12 with an entire league. So I think there's some value for the TV networks too. Big 12's in a position of power. San Diego State's interesting. I'd like to see him join. I think they'd be a good addition. Even if the others don't, but I get it. If you don't get any other ones, I would understand it. What a is it a mess or is it interesting? I don't know. It's a mess, I guess. Next week and a half, we're probably going to know. Sports Daily rolling on. IHOP hotline is open. What do you think? 869-1240. We'll come back more right after this. Welcome back to Sports Daily, everybody. It's Albracht and Castor. Tommy, did you see Dalvin Cook mentioning, I think it was to Schefter on a podcast or something, that he'd love to play with DeAndre Hopkins as like a joint package? That's really interesting. He's trying to make about $10 million a year. I think he's going to wait a while. I think he still brings plenty to the table. To make him, I think Dalvin Cook's got plenty of value. I think DeAndre Hopkins, for at least a short term, has plenty of value. That's an interesting thought. Like, what about bringing in both of those guys potentially? And I think it's really interesting because I think it could make one of these younger teams, like with a young quarterback, could make their lives easier. I kind of like it. I kind of like that idea.
I think that there is the benefit of having a ton of experience with a running back like Cook and a wide receiver like Hopkins. I'm just not sure. I mean, look, Dalvin Cook is going to want to get paid, right? And so, teams that are looking at wanting to package these two players together, you're going to have to pay for Hopkins and for Cook. And wouldn't it be better, I think your money could be spent better if you're a team to spend it on Hopkins, not spend it on Dalvin Cook, and save some money at the running back position and go use that money elsewhere. That's nothing against Dalvin Cook. I think he's a fine running back. He's had a lot of success over the course of his career. I'm just not sure that money for a team that has a lot of young players on it would be best spent by bringing in Dalvin Cook.
Well, I think it all depends on need and how many years are you talking about for Cook? Like 1 year? If it's 1 year and you're a team, I think about the Panthers. Panthers keep popping into my head. You go Bryce Young. You don't have a clear-cut answer at running back, right? And you could certainly use a receiver. Is that going to make and help the development of your young quarterback and give you a better chance to win a weak division this year? Yeah, I mean, absolutely, I think it does. Now, they haven't been rumored, I don't think, for either one of these guys. No. But I'm thinking teams like that, if you're the Titans, like what do the Titans have to lose, right? Like, you just help yourself a little bit. I think there's plenty of teams that could use a couple of skilled players like that who what you're getting from, right? Like, are they, the best versions of themselves? No. But if you've got wiggle room and you can get them both on short deals, what does it hurt? I guess is my point. Like, nobody wants to save money who wants to save money in the NFL? You got a salary cap. If you've got it, you're not using it.
Save money, but use that money, for other needs potentially. Like,
we
talked about it. Well, we've talked about it before about the way that teams are spending money on running backs. It's different now. And I mean, there's a reason why the Vikings, even though Dalvin Cook has had success, they're not wanting to pay Dalvin Cook. And I get it. I understand it. The same way that the Titans aren't wanting to pay Derrick Henry. So I just don't like the team. I would say the one team that's been linked to DeAndre Hopkins the most recently, it's been the Titans, right? If they don't want to spend money on Derrick Henry, why in the world are they going to want to spend money on Dalvin Cook?
Right. Yeah. And I don't know, because it's less money, because they can afford it. Maybe. I look at the Texans. Like, the Texans make sense to me. Dameon Pierce is good, but I wouldn't mind having Dalvin Cook there too. And they could definitely use a receiver. That would be an interesting one. I still think the Panthers signed Miles Sanders, so maybe they don't have as much of a need there. But even then, like, I don't know. I'm in. I still think Dalvin Cook's pretty good. Who else makes sense? Could you get Aaron Jones, another complimentary piece? Probably. He's done well, but then you've still got AJ Dillon there. I'm looking at CBS Sports put out an article of like the worst triplets, right? When you think about quarterback, top running back, and top wide receiver. I think Panthers Texans make the most sense to me as a potential like duo, right? Where you bring in both of those guys in Dalvin Cook and DeAndre Hopkins. I just don't think it hurts anything for some of these younger teams to bring in two guys of that skill set. Now, obviously, money is a factor here, but like for Cook, if it's 1 year and $10 million and you have $10 million to spend, he's still good. Like, he's still going to help your team. Dalvin Cook, when did Dalvin Cook become this player that nobody wants? I don't understand. I still think he makes sense for the Cowboys. I mean,
But
maybe
don't
the
you think-
Cowboys are a potential fit for both of those guys. I don't think they can afford it.
Don't you think, though? I mean, there are countless examples this offseason specifically of running backs that are not getting paid and are going to try to find other teams. And so, really, I would say the only reason that this would work for a team like the Texans or the Panthers or a team like that would be if you can get Dalvin Cook at a discount, and maybe you can. But I mean, think about like Austin Eckler, for example. He was interested in going somewhere else, and I think he smartly realized he wasn't going to get paid. Ezekiel Elliott doesn't have a team yet, probably because he's not going to get paid.
The difference in Zeke and Dalvin Cook right now,
I'm talking about like in general, established running backs in the NFL, right? There's a reason why teams like the Texans are going after, they've got Dameon Pierce on the roster. There's a reason why the Chiefs have Isaiah Pacheco. Like, you've got running backs that are effective at a certain level, but they're cheap. They're cheap, and teams are not wanting in general to invest a lot of money in the running back position. It's just not the way that it is right now.
There's so much more tread on the tires of somebody like Zeke, and he and Dalvin Cook are the same age, but Zeke's played longer, and he's got about 600 more carries over his career. Dalvin Cook last year was, I mean, he was 10 touchdowns, 4.5 yards a carry. We know he can catch the ball. He played in all the games last year. Like, Zeke, when you watch him play, you're like, okay, Zeke's not what Zeke used to be. I think Zeke still has some value for a team, but not in the same way Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook's been a Pro Bowler the last 4 years. Like, Dalvin Cook is still good.
I'm not saying he's not good. That's not, you're missing my point.
I know what you're saying. You're saying the
player.
running backs don't have that sort of value. But what I'm saying is, if you're a team that has a need and has the money, and especially these teams with young quarterbacks who are going to need some of the pressure taken off of them, right? What is the harm in that? And DeAndre Hopkins has some of that same appeal, right? Like, there's no question that DeAndre Hopkins is going to make life easier for, let's say, Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. Of course he is. He's good. And is he as good? No. Is he worth the contract he's currently got? Probably not. I mean, Dalvin Cook makes more sense than DeAndre Hopkins, but both of those guys together, like, if you look at it and you say, God, we have this money, this isn't going to hamstring us or prevent us from doing something else because there's not really anything else out there for us. I do think that it's an interesting possibility for somebody to say, well, okay, we weren't really planning on like trying to load up and go for it, but why not? Right? Like, if you're the Texans, what is it going to hurt you if you've got the money and you don't have anywhere else to put that money right now in the short term to try and help? Because that's the reality.
You don't think the Texans have plenty of other places to put that money right now?
No,
I think they do.
Based on what's out there right now, like, what are they going to go do right now? Right? Like, what are you going to do right now that makes your team better than spending money in a short term? Again, that doesn't affect really your long-term plans at all. Like, what are you going to do that's better than that for CJ Stroud?
I'm not saying that it's a bad thing to take the burden or the pressure off of a young quarterback like a CJ Stroud in Houston by bringing in established running backs and wide receivers. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that I think that the improvement of the team overall, I think if let's just say the Texans, for example, they've drafted CJ Stroud to be the starter, and then they bring in those two guys. They bring in Cook and they bring in Hopkins. Are they a playoff team with those two players? Probably not. Probably not. I think that it will improve them for sure, and it might make CJ Stroud's transition into the NFL a little bit smoother and better overall. But I don't think that, by bringing in Hopkins and Cook together as a tandem package deal for a team like the Texans, all of a sudden they're a contender. I don't buy that at all. I think that you've got other pieces on that roster that are going to need, some help. And don't forget, they've got other young pieces on the defense and that sort of thing. I don't see that for a team like the Texans or the Panthers. I don't see it being that big of a game changer if they're investing the money into Hopkins and Cook.
Well, it depends on what you mean by game changer too, I think, because like for the Texans, is that all of a sudden going to make them a playoff contender?
No.
Probably not.
I don't think
their
so.
Their division's not very good, but yeah, probably not. But for a team like the Panthers, I think it's interesting. that it could accomplish both goals. Even if it doesn't, though, there is nothing right now over the next 2 seasons that will be more important to the Texans and the Panthers than doing absolutely everything they can to develop those quarterbacks. Winning be damned, who cares? Though if your team is going to do anything in this league, those quarterbacks have to be good. So it makes sense. And by the way, splitting Dalvin Cook and DeAndre Hopkins is still the most likely thing. I don't know why, like the Colts. Why aren't the Colts interested in Hopkins? But anyway, when we talk about those two guys together, because, and again, Dalvin Cook brought this up, and it's probably unlikely. But I do think, like, sometimes we overthink, like, a team like the Panthers or the Texans, who everybody knows they're not going to do anything as far as the Super Bowl goes this year. But when we talk about adding these players, we're always like, oh, well, that's not going to make a difference anyway. Well, maybe it doesn't make a difference in them winning a Super Bowl, but man, it's going to make a difference in the development of those quarterbacks because it gives them 2 safety nets, not just 1, but 2. DeAndre Hopkins is a safety net, even if he's just a safety net at the goal line at this point in his career, right? To give your quarterback an option in the red zone to not turn the ball over or make a mistake. Just give him a go get it ball. It gives him confidence to make those kinds of throws. And Dalvin Cook, I think, has far more value. Dalvin Cook, I think, is still 1 or 2 years of useful football at that position for sure, especially in a tandem backfield.
At this point, I'm just hesitant to give running backs the money that they want. The market is dictating that they're not making that kind of money. And so I don't want to be, if I'm the GM of a team, I don't want to reach. I don't want to overpay for the ability to get Dalvin Cook. I mean, yeah, he's a viable running back for sure. I'm just not sure that's the investment I want to take.
I've got an interesting question for you on Dalvin Cook, and it pertains to the Chiefs, and it has to do with what you just said. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back with that question. It's Sports Daily, Albracht and Castor. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody. We're talking Dalvin Cook and DeAndre Hopkins, and it just brings up the same old debate, right? Like, are running backs worth it anymore? And, I think there's this perception of, like, running backs don't have value in the NFL is not the correct one. So I'll ask it to you this way, Tommy. Let's say that the Chiefs, like, money is it's an option, but the Chiefs had room for it, and it didn't prevent them from doing it. Now, this is obviously hypothetical because the Chiefs have lots of things they need to be doing. But just in general terms of, like, running back on the field, I think there's this perception that people would say, like, Isaiah Pacheco and Dalvin Cook are interchangeable. And, man, I think that's way off. Like, I think that's way off. Yes, Dalvin Cook is more expensive, and part of Pacheco's value is that he was a 7th-round pick. But let's not pretend like they're interchangeable and you can just throw anybody back there at running back and have, and be effective. Otherwise, Clyde Edwards-Helaire would be fine, right? No, like, clearly some players are better than others. Let's not pretend like running backs don't have value in this league. Like, who would you rather have, Isaiah Pacheco or Dalvin Cook?
It's a completely different argument, though. I mean, I think the question of whether or not running backs have value, like, I'm not suggesting that at all. Like, clearly running backs continue to have value in the NFL. It's just a matter of how much you're willing to pay them is the value. And can you get a similar level of production at a price point that is lower than somebody else? And so I would suggest that if you're asking me, would I rather have Dalvin Cook at his price point or Isaiah Pacheco at his price point, I'd probably say Pacheco at his price point because I'd rather use the money to do other things on my team. So if all things are equal and money is not an option, Dalvin Cook is a more talented running back than Isaiah Pacheco, but you also have to look at it from the investment side of it as well, and also other needs on the team and all of these other things that go into it. But no, I would say that, I mean, when was the last time that you can definitively point at a running back as being maybe not the reason, but a large reason that a team won a Super Bowl?
Todd Gurley, probably.
Okay. How many years ago was that? That was probably 4 years ago,
Yeah.
And he was a great player, but even then, remember the Rams were like, no, we're going to probably move away from you.
Well, because he had a knee injury. He had an injury. I'm just trying to look here. So you had Chiefs over Eagles last year. The Bengals obviously got there behind a big running back and Joe Mixon. He was a big part of that. The Bucks ran the ball very effectively when they won a Super Bowl, and Leonard Fournette was high draft capital. Who did the Niners run out there? Because they had to have had a good running back. Who would have been their running back the year the Chiefs beat them?
Raheem Mostert, I would imagine. I think.
They've had a weird like collection of guys, but they've invested in those guys. They've invested in that position for sure. So let's look at it that way, right? What teams have invested in that position? That would probably be an easier way to look at this. The Chiefs, no. Well, they invested the wrong way, but the reason they were there was not because they invested in that
and
position.
I think you can point at like the first Super Bowl the Chiefs won. Damian Williams had a great game running the ball. But he wasn't. It wasn't like that was
got there. They weren't investing. The Chiefs are the opposite of this argument, by the way. The Rams, the year they beat the Bengals, invested in that position. They spent draft capital both times the Rams have been to the Super Bowl. Quite frankly, the Bucks absolutely invested in the position with Leonard Fournette. The Niners have invested in that position and been to a Super Bowl. The Patriots have invested moderately heavily in that position and have been to a Super Bowl. Sony Michel and Ramondre, they've spent some draft capital on running backs. The Eagles took Miles Sanders in the first round. They've been there twice in recent years. Was Miles Sanders there when they beat the Patriots? He may not have been yet. When the Falcons were there, who's their running back? They had a good running back in those days. Was that the Michael Turner years? I don't remember. It's there. It's there. It's both. Like, that's the thing. It's both. The Bengals, Joe Mixon's been a big part of what they've done. Has running back.
Even if it is both, then that leans on the side of the argument of, well, you can kind of get it done either way, can't you? right?
You can get it done either way. Oh, sure. But what I'm saying, there's the fallacy that I'm talking about is that you just don't need one. There's no point anymore. And I'm like, that's crazy talk, because the reason the Vikings have been contenders is because they've had a great running game. Like, despite it, right? The Packers, great running game. These teams that are the Niners have invested a ton at that position, and they've been successful in that. The Bengals have, and the Rams recently, right? So it happens both ways. There's still ways to it. I just don't understand why, like, this running backs don't matter thing. I think it's so dependent on how your team is built. Running backs can matter. They can matter. They can be the most important position on your team, Titans, right? Or you can build your team in other ways. But let's not pretend like the Chiefs' offense was, to me, the best version of itself when Kareem Hunt, before he, was an idiot. That was the best Chiefs offense we've ever seen. I think the most explosive, the most dynamic, all of these things was that time, right? So even the Chiefs, when it's there, can get it done. Now they've gotten it done in other ways for sure. There's no question about that. But teams still can need running backs. Running backs still have value. Trying to figure out that value for different teams is where we get complicated every year for sure.
They have value. Running backs continue to have value. I'm not arguing that, but it's a very simple value proposition. And, if I'm looking at, I don't know, buying a car, am I going to buy a car that is going to cost me a lot more money when I can get a car for less money and it's going to do the same thing for me and it's still going to get me from point A to point B? I mean, it's a value proposition, right? So Dalvin Cook is a talented running back, but if I can still get the job done with another running back that's going to cost me less money, then teams are clearly going to look at that direction and go that direction.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's these guys still are going to make an impact on teams. And maybe I'm old school, but I still think there's good value in running back. We'll continue the conversation as we make our way through free agency. We'll come back. We'll tell you what's on tap on the network today. Sports Daily, rolling on a Tuesday.
Planning a 4th of July party? Shop Pride Ag Ace for all your grilling supply needs. Whether it's a new grill or just that right rubber sauce, even a bag of charcoal or a propane bottle fill, we got it covered.
All right, that's it for us, everybody. Today, Jim Rome at 11, Bob and Jeff at 2, Maggie and Perloff at 4, Zach Gelb at 5 before the Royals in Detroit at 5:30. We'll give away some Wind Surge tickets tomorrow, as well as some other fun. That's what's on tap for then. Enjoy the Tuesday, everybody. We'll be back Wednesday. For Tommy Castor and Chad Chambers, I'm Jacob Albracht. See you then.